Welcome to Stephanie's Threads. I am Stephanie. Thank you for joining me as I spend time sharing with you my love of handmade textiles. It is my pleasure to share with you my knitting, my crochet, my sewing, and it's National Quilt Month, so I'm happy to share a new quilt that I've started for a very dear friend. I am filming today on a very lovely spring day in my studio in Western Colorado. I have a very warm sweater on because I finished it recently, but it's much too warm for the temperature today. So I hope wherever you are, the winter is starting to wane and people have their eyes towards spring. I'm going to spend time today talking to you about my gearing up for some new knits in the month of March. As I finished this sweater, I finished the socks that I had, I finished a couple of hats, and I realized I wanted to put some new sweaters on my needles. I'm actually going to cast on 2 sweaters, which is unusual for me to do that at the same time, but I'll explain why as we proceed through this. So I hope that you will enjoy hearing about my process for how I plan new knits, particularly sweaters, when I am going to make them. So that's what I'm going to be speaking to you about today. I am knitting from my stash this year. This whole series of cabinets back there holds yarn that I've accumulated in the past 5 or 6 years, and I want to use what I have and not purchase new. My first consideration is, what do I have that I can use? So rather than having a pattern attract me, really what I am doing is looking at the yarn and seeing what attracts me, what stimulates me for right now in terms of something I would like to knit. So for me, primarily that starts with color, yarn weight, but I would say predominantly it's the color, something that attracts me color-wise for something that I might want to knit. And because I'm shopping from stash, I have a little process that I go through to make sure that I can pick something out that will be a good combination of something I'd like to wear and to make with yarn that I have. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. The first thing that I do once I pick out a yarn is I look at Ravelry and I think about, do I want to do something complex or do I want to do something fairly simple? In the knitting world, I know we call it potato chip knitting, but it's more just, you're not having to look at a pattern while you're knitting. You're not doing color work. You're not doing cables, you're not doing texture. So, or you can choose to do those things. If that's what your yen is, you might want to say, oh, well, I'd like to do a color work sweater, or I'd like to do a cable sweater. Right now, because I still have my birch pullover, which is a half fisherman's rib knit on size 3 needles, and it's very slow going, I wanted something faster. Something that would be intriguing to me from a construction standpoint, but not something where I'm having to pay attention to color work and to textures, cables, anything like that. I want something fairly straightforward. So I picked out 2 patterns that were intriguing to me because I actually was attracted to 2 different yarns that I had in my stash. Let me show you the yarn first so that you'll see what I was attracted to. The first one is a DK weight yarn. So this is a Cloudborn fiber DK and the color Plum Heather. Now, I'll be honest, I find that I would classify this more as like a very light DK, maybe sport. So when it said DK, I was like, I'm not sure about that, which is why swatching becomes very important to me. The second yarn that I was attracted to, which is interesting, right? These colors are both more fall type colors, but I'm very attracted to knitting with them right now. This is a yarn that I have had in my stash forever. I mean, seriously, like maybe 25 years. It's Erdel yarn with Lazier, and the color is a number. So, but it's a very, what'd you call that? Like rusty kind of color. Very pretty. And this is more in my color palette, but I have so much of this yarn. I actually purchased it to make a duster type sweater from a Vogue knitting magazine that I saw years ago, and far before I would have ever had the skill to tackle it. And I realized it's like, well, I just won't ever knit that, so I'd like to use this. I probably have enough of this yarn to make 2 different sweaters. So let me talk to you about how I then tackle, once I have the yarn, what then do I do? And what I typically do is I'll look again in Ravelry, see what might be attractive to me. And in this case, there was definitely a sweater that I've been looking at for quite some time. It's called the Cloud Sweater by PetiteKnit. This is a very popular knitting pattern right now. I just like the structure of it. I like the little roll she has. I'll put a picture so you can see in case you haven't seen it. You've probably knit it. But anyway, I thought, well, that could be interesting, but it isn't. It's a bulky weight pattern. So this yarn is a no-go for that. But this could work. This is a worsted weight yarn. So what I thought is I would have to strand it with something, or I have so much of it. My first thought was perhaps I could knit it double, so a double strand of this, and see if I could meet gauge. So my first step is to knit a gauge swatch. Let's talk about gauge for just a second. When you are looking at a sweater pattern, and I'll put an excerpt from the pattern, from one of the patterns that you'll see. Even when you're looking at a pattern, it offers you the gauge. And the gauge really is the size of the knit stitch or the textured stitch or the cable stitch as you're knitting. It's very important when the designers create the garment, they specify a gauge so that they can ensure that you achieve the correct fit. So unless you're a super experienced knitter, which you could be, I am not. There are people who make up their own sweater patterns and just go to town and put everything together. I do follow patterns carefully because I'm not talented enough to figure out all of the fit through the shoulders and the shaping and all of that. So I just like to get a pattern and use a pattern. But what I'm looking for when I am trying to do my gauge swatches is to make sure that my knit stitches are going to match what the designer had in mind when they created the pattern for the garment. So without that, your sweater could be ill-fitting, it could be too small, too big. So I do always do a gauge swatch because I want to make sure that I like the texture that I'm creating with my knitting. And I would like to make sure that the garment fits. So I'm going to show you my gauge swatches. Now, I will be honest, when most people speak about gauge swatches, they are looking for you to make a gauge swatch that's at least 4 inches by 4 inches or 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. Many knitting experts advise that you even do 6 inches, 7-inch gauge swatch. I, over the years, have discovered that my gauge swatches of this size are accurate, and I don't choose to spend all the time making the larger swatches. I also, one of the things that I do adhere to is there's a recommendation that you knit your swatch and you block it in the same way that you would a finished garment. So as an example, once I finish these, I put them in a cold water bath with some soak liquid, and I let them rest for usually 30 minutes to an hour, and then I take them out, squeeze them dry, lay them flat. These are done with pins. I have other blocking pins, but I wanted to do this in a way that you could see the swatch and not have the view be obstructed by the other things that I use. So once it dries, you then take a gauge ruler. This is my favorite one. I bought this years ago. And there are many, many different gauge rulers that you can use. The key for me is I really like the way that this opening is used, because I can place this on my gauge and then I can count it. I'm going to insert a couple of stills so that you can see how I like to measure my gauge swatches. I do use a pins to mark the beginning and the end of the segment. I do use a 2-inch and then I multiply it by 2. Most gauge recommendations come in 4-inch or 10-centimeter measures. So then you can figure out if you are meeting gauge. Now, in the situation of this sweater, which I'll give you the pattern name in just a second, I met the designer's gauge. So I knew I could use the recommended needles, and I could use my yarn, the Cloudborn Fibers Highland DK, and I would be able to meet the gauge specified. However, when I went to measure this one for the Cloud sweater by PetiteKnit, I did not meet gauge. So the gauge on this one was 17 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and my gauge was 14 stitches. So being off by 3 stitches, I can do knitting math and get there, but I didn't trust it, and I didn't love the fiber. And this, by the way, this I took this Lazier yarn and held it double. So it's a little thick for me, and I'm still going to be swatching to see if I can come up with the right combination of needles for this yarn to make that sweater. So that is very much a work in progress for me, but for me, swatching is part of the knitting experience when it comes to sweaters, and I don't mind if I have to swatch 5, 6, 7 times, I don't mind it at all. And the other thing is that it really helps me to know if I'm going to end up liking the sweater in the yarn. It has nothing to do with the pattern. It has to do with the combination of pattern, yarn, and needle. So what I'm going to do is, again, go back to this one and say that I did meet gauge. The pattern that I'm choosing to knit with that yarn is called the Matcha Jumper. I'll put a picture of the designer's image here so you can see it. This is an $11.62 pattern US. She's a German designer. She doesn't give her proper name, but her company designer name is Vert Knit, V-E-R-T-N-I-T. This is a DK weight sweater, and the gauge is 22 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters. You knit it with 3 needles, US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter, US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter, and a US 0, which is a 2.0 millimeter. The reason I picked it is it has an interesting construction that I haven't done before. So it's a saddle shoulder garment. But what's interesting, and I'll show you, I've got it started so that I could show you. By the way, this is my knit bag that I have it in. I call it my cherry blossom bag. And the part I love is the inside has this precious little sheepy fabric. I hope you can see that. I got this started. Now, what's interesting is that this is the upper neckline. So you'll have seen from the picture, there's a ribbed neck on it, and this is not, I have not knit that yet. From what I can glean from the pattern, I'm going to have to go back and pick it up. So this would be the top, and I'm going to end up adding the ribbed collar to this after I pick it up. I'm enjoying this very much. It's a very pleasant knit. It's a long pattern, very, very detailed. So I haven't knit one of her patterns before. So I'm looking forward to learning some new techniques. The comments that I read from other folks that knit it indicated that the construction was very interesting and very engaging. And I thought, okay, that sounds great to me. So what I did want to share, and one of the things that again also attracted me to the pattern, is she has a lot. One of the things I look for nowadays in patterns is when the designer offers options. I've told you before, I'm a Gemini. I love my options. So one of the things that she did with this pattern is she offers, let's see, instructions to make the shoulders wider. She has bust darts if you need them to add more volume to the sweater to accommodate a larger bust. She has waist shaping. She has several different shaping options that she's built into the pattern that you can just decide what you want to use and what you don't want to use, you can just ignore. So she's got the main pattern and then she's got all of these different options. It's a long pattern, but very much to me, very well worth the cost of the pattern because she's really put a lot of attention into letting you customize the fit. And that's one thing I did want to share with you is this is the schematic for the cloud sweater. One thing I'm very conscious of now is when I purchase patterns, I really do look to see if they include a schematic. The reason for that is that everybody's body is different. And when you then factor in the fact that you've got different textures coming out because of your yarn and your needle choices and your knitting style. Some people are loose knitters, some people are tight knitters. I tend to be a loose knitter. So even if you meet gauge, your yarn can alter the way that the garment fits and feels. So I did want to speak about this for just a moment. When you are looking at your pattern, it really is important. And I learned this from sewing as well. Knitting and sewing do not work that you go to the store and you say, oh, I'm a large or I'm a small or I'm an extra small. Making your own garments doesn't work that way. You need to actually look at the measurements and you need to see if the measurements fit your body. And especially with knitting, like I always wear an underlayer. So I always have a turtleneck under my sweaters. And when I measure myself to measure my sweaters, I wear a turtleneck because I want to be sure that I'm wearing the same garment versus wearing something that's next to my skin because I'll never wear the sweater that way. I couldn't knit something that's too small. So when you are looking at your sizing, hopefully the schematic gives you lots of information about the circumference of your bust, your neck, your sleeves, and your waist down here. And without that, you're kind of guessing. And the same as with sewing, what you're really interested in is the finished garment measurement. So as an example, many knitting patterns are written to say for a bust measurement of, let's just say 40. However, the designers always nearly always include an ease. You can either have positive ease, negative ease, or no ease. And what that means is the way that the garment is intended to hug your body. So many knitting patterns nowadays, like the cloud sweater is a really good example. She created the pattern so that there are intended to be, I believe it's between 6 and 10 inches of positive ease. Now, as a larger person, I tend not to make garments that large for myself. So in other words, if I say, well, I'm knitting for a bust measurement of 44, and I'm going to go ahead and add 10 extra inches to that to make like a 54-inch garment, I would be swimming in that. And that's just not the look for me. For a very small person, like if I were knitting for my sister, she's a tiny little thing. And so it would be fun to make her something, if she wanted it, that oversized, that's great. And you absolutely need to make those choices for yourself. But it is important that you know when you're reading through your pattern, what is the designer's intended ease? And then you can back off or go all the way with those. So this is something that I think I learned a little bit the hard way that I needed to pay more attention to my finished garment measurements. So as an example, I may look and see, okay, I'm going to knit potentially for a 40-inch bust, but if my finished garment size for the size that I would pick is 50 inches, I'm not going to choose that. I'm going to come down from that. Maybe I'll give myself 2 inches of positive ease, and that will be comfortable, but I'm not going to be floating in it. So that's a really important measurement. The other thing is, like, for the arms, I have large arms in my upper biceps, and so I'm very careful when I'm choosing my size. Sometimes, depending on the designer, I need to just, let me say I would knit for a size large, but then for the arms, I might actually knit the size extra large. And I've had to learn how to adjust for those adjustments to make sure that the sweater that I create is what I want. So I do think that's very important. I pay lots of attention to that. Once I get my pattern, I'm a paper pattern girl. I don't like to use the online apps. So I do highlight the size that I'm knitting. I may end up, hopefully the next episode, I'll have gotten my swatch set for the cloud sweater, and I may have to do some knit math, so I'll share that with you. I don't need to do that for the Matcha Jumper, so I'm not going to talk you through that today. Then, like I say, the other thing is, the other thing, of course, is making sure that I have enough yardage, because I'm shopping from Stash. If you were going to a store, you would need to know how much yarn you're going to end up using. But for me, I just need to make sure that I can pull enough yarn from my stash to knit the sweater. And in the case of both of these, I definitely have enough yarn. I did finish my reknit of my Moosonee. This is the Moosonee pullover. It's a super bulky weight pattern by Tara Lynn Morrison, $7.50 US. I knit mine with Wool in the Gang Crazy Sexy Wool in the color Cameo Rose. I knit it with 3 different needle sizes, a US 13, which is a 9.0 millimeter, a US 15, which is a 10.0 millimeter, and a US 17, which is a 12.0 millimeter. I'm going to stand up, and remember, this is one of the ones I talked about it in my last episode. I had knit it a few years ago. I lost weight. I wasn't wearing it. It was falling off my shoulders. So I reknit it, and I couldn't be more pleased with the fit. But let me back up so that you can actually see it. It is a cropped pullover. And I tell you what, I nearly ran out of yarn. So as I had shared with you in the last episode, when I knit it the first time, I knit it with size 19 needles, and I was not on gauge. I don't think I knew it at the time that I wasn't. But this time I was, and I used more yarn using the smaller needles. And so I did have to shorten. Probably this is intended to have about another 1 to 2 inches of ribbing, but I ran out, and honestly, I did not want to purchase 1 skein of additional yarn. They do still make the yarn, but I said, you know what, I'm just going to leave it cropped. I'm going to be very happy with it, and I do love it. It's exactly what I wanted, and I couldn't be happier that I took the time to reknit it. The other thing I wanted to do is to show you, this is my Stephen West Shawlography. Every year, Stephen West is a very famous designer. I think he lives in Amsterdam, I'm pretty sure. He has a beautiful yarn store there. Every year he does a mystery knit along in the October timeframe. And he basically tells you kind of like nothing, except you need 4 skeins of yarn, 5 skeins of yarn, and kind of how to think about your colors. The reason I wanted to put this up on my form today is to show you, I knit this entirely from Stash. It needed 5 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And at the time, I did not want to buy new yarn. So I did my Stash dive, and I had so much fun with this knit along. You knit this whole thing in 4 weeks. So he releases a clue once a week. There's lots of mystery knit alongs. You may know about them. But anyway, I was very pleased with this. I wear it regularly. Steven's shawls, they're not for everybody because his taste can be a little out there. But I found if you pick the colors that suit your palette, then you can absolutely make something that suits you and wear. And I think that his stuff, it's like art. It's like a piece of art. So really what I just wanted to share with you is if you have a stash, you can absolutely knit from stash. You don't have to be limited to think, oh, I didn't buy for that particular project. Use your imagination and use your yarn stash and really enjoy that. The next new project I have on my needles is a pair of socks. I finished the ones that I had going before, and I had shared with you, I typically always keep a pair of socks on my needles. They're a very nice, they're very relaxing for me to knit on. I am using the Smooth Operator Sock Pattern by Susan B. Anderson. You know, it was funny, I was looking up the price. It's a $5 pattern, and I have to say, that pattern has so much information in it. Susan, really, it's a gift to my point of view. It's one of the two sock patterns I use very frequently, but it's a phenomenal pattern, and I was a little surprised to see that it was $5 because I bought it years ago. So I am making this with a yarn called, it's a yarn by Artistik yarn, and it's called the Metropolitan Ice Cream, which I have to say always makes me think of my niece because she loves ice cream so much. And I just had to show you this. I bought this yarn. It's a Canadian dyer, so I probably bought it 2 or 3 years ago, and I think they package their stuff so adorably. They have a little business card. They have a piece of the yarn attached, but the thing is they give you a little stitch marker so you can see that's an ice cream sundae. And my sister and Olivia, my niece, will appreciate that. They love to get ice cream sundaes. Giant, they're both the tiniest little people, and they get the most gigantic ice creams you've ever seen in your life, and they eat them. They mac down on them. They're amazing. But anyway, this is a self-striping yarn. So this is what it looks like, and I will be using this for the heels and the toes. This is the cuff. So I finished the cuff of one sock at this point. And I wanted to also show this to you because I do start my socks off and I finish them with double point needles, but I use 9-inch circulars. I am very excited to share with you the first quilting content I'm putting on my channel. A lot of people have commented that you can see quilts in the background of my studio. Because it is National Quilting Month, I did want to share with you that I started a new quilt for my dear, dear friend Dwayne. He bought a home and has just really wanted, he's seen the quilts in my house and really wanted something that was cozy for his new home. So while he and my best friend were here visiting over the Christmas time, we picked out for him a pattern that's very unusual for me, but it's called the Entwined Quilt pattern by Quilt Factory. It's a 76 by 76 inch quilt. Not everybody wants florals and soft fabrics. You need to be able to align it with their home so that it works for them. So we picked out a fabric line by Andover Fabrics, and it's called Jamestown by Joe Morton. And you can see some of the fabrics on the back. That's a little glary, but you can see. However, I did go ahead, you make this quilt in 16 blocks. So you make 16 just like this, but the great thing is that the fabric to me is very, very interesting, and it also does, of course, work with his decor. I will be working on that through the month of March in honor of Dwayne and National Quilt Month. Those are my current sweater, sock, sewing projects that I have going. And again, in the next episode, I'll let you know if I've had success. I'm sure it won't be that difficult, but getting the cloud sweater set up so that I can knit it with this yarn, because I would like to make that sweater. I think it's very pretty, and I've seen lots and lots of people wear it, and it looks good on everybody, which I admire. I do want to thank you so much for engaging with my videos. I have appreciated every comment people leave. If you found me, I hope that you will subscribe, leave a comment for me about things that you love. If you're quilting anything for the month of March, or if you have new knitting plans for the month of March, I would love to see that. And thank you for watching. Until we meet again, I wish you smooth stitches and so much peace.